Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Lost Origin, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code, OmniPoke. For today's video, myself and Jack are going to be looking at our recent Lille results. We actually both landed on the same 60, possibly for different reasons though, so wanted to go through our mentality going into this tournament, and also talk about the matchups that we faced on the day. We also have the Warsaw Regional Championships, which will also be the exact same format, so we will have our knee-jerk reactions from the top 8 from Lille as well, and sort of talk about what we're focusing on going into this next 3-week stint of testing, where we have nothing else really to look at. It's just going to be our own thoughts and what we've just seen from the previous event to sort of go off of. So yeah, we both landed on the Quad DTE build of Mew. I know Mew is something that you've defaulted to before, Jack, for a number of regionals and had a lot of success last season with it. So what was the main sort of motivation around Mew for you?
I think there was two main reasons. One, just the situations of how I was getting to the event. Obviously, you've mentioned Mew was the only deck I made points with last season. So it felt, even though the DT build does play differently and does feel different, I hadn't really tested too much with the DT build. At the heart, they are very similar decks. It's still kind of the same idea. So it was naturally something that I felt pretty comfortable with, even not testing masses and masses of. Yeah, due to the way I was attending the event, we were traveling up on the morning of, so I knew I wasn't going to be getting much sleep and stuff. So I wanted to play something that wasn't too didn't have like masses and masses of decisions that really or could like completely change things later down the line. I feel like with Mew, feel very comfortable with a lot of the decisions that you have to make, whereas something like a Lost Box or a Giratina, one wrong flower selecting in the first couple of turns can completely derail the game like 3 or 4 turns later.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel massively comfortable, given the situation I'd put myself in and traveling to the event and stuff, massively comfortable playing a deck like that, even though I probably would have had more fun. I think, without a doubt, the most fun I've had in this format so far has been the Lost Zone stuff for sure, but I knew I wouldn't really be respecting myself and the conditions I was actually attending the event in if I was going to play those, to be able to then also try and get some points, because at the end of the day, we were both there to at least like get on the ladder and start getting a head start towards Yokohama. So yeah, one aspect was just familiarity, not necessarily with the DT build, but just with the archetype in general. And then the other thing was, realistically, I think the meta is a super wide meta right now, and every time I played a deck that I felt confident against 2 prizes with, I would run into decks that had a lot of 2 prize hate. Every time I played a deck that I felt confident had 1 prize, good 1 prize matchups, I felt I ran into a lot of 1 prize hate. And just because there was a real wide array of decks that I felt we could face, I wanted to play something that had a game plan against a lot of stuff, even if a lot of the time it was something like a Roxanne or a Marnie in a path to try and get back into the game. I felt like the aggression of Mew, both Joe and I felt like it was one of the best, if not the best, going first deck in terms of aggression against multiple prize Pokemon.
Yeah.
And we added a couple of techs here and there to try and help out against some of the 1 prize decks. So I felt like it was one of the best decks to give me an opportunity into pretty much every matchup across the board, whatever my opponent was playing. There's a couple of things that we didn't necessarily expect or didn't necessarily tech for or whatever. And I also think, obviously, any deck could have quite easily popped in a Drapion and caused some headaches. But me and you kind of concluded that realistically, the decks that should be playing Drapion are things like the Lost Zone Giratina. Realistically, it's not massively useful to the game plan of other decks if they put it in, and it's sometimes even beneficial for us in our game plan for other decks if they put it in. So the only one I was actually scared of playing Drapion was Lost Zone Giratina. I felt like we would be able to handle Drapions in other decks here and there. It was a bit, I was a bit unnerved about theoretically anyone can just throw in a Drapion and like I say, cause headaches, because it is a massive tempo swing, and if you can't deal with it, it's just game losing. But I felt better putting myself in that situation rather than trying to dodge and weave certain matchups. I felt like I wanted to try and dodge and weave a card rather than dodge and weave specific matchups, because it felt like that was probably going to be a more reliable strategy when the meta was so wide, I guess.
Yeah, really good points there to pick up on straight away. I think already Drapion, after I've tested a lot of the Mew deck now with the DTE, I was very skeptical of Mew with DTEs just because of that fear of Drapion. I realized that when you go first with the deck, Drapion is not a huge issue at all because the tempo that you provide with such a high hit point VMAX, obviously, by turn 2, you've probably taken a 2-prize knockout if it's one of these decks that is playing Drapion on turn 2 in a lot of instances. And if they then respond with the Drapion, it's so early in the game for them that their deck is so fat and they've not been able to actually like set up their board. They've committed resources to getting Drapion in the first place just to respond on you. The fact that you can Roxanne them and sometimes path them at the same time can really shut down decks, and you can... It sort of feeds into your prize map very easily because the Drapion has such low hit points. It means that you've been able to conserve power tablets and whatnot, so that you are just able to like get that Echoing Horn boss game plan and just have the 2/2/2 route very clearly for you. Like people throwing in Drapion into like Arceus decks, certainly, for example. I felt pretty safe against that, especially when you go first. When you go second, it's a bit harder because they can take that like 180 hit point Mew knockout, or even if you have Oricorio down, they can belt up and that sort of thing. And that's when the Drapion gets really scary, but still they're going from 2 to 5 prizes. So you always have that window to try and Roxanne and catch back up. And in our list, we actually, well, I've certainly found in testing that it's much more valuable to path the opponent on the same turn that you knock out Drapion than it is to Lost City them. And that'll reflect in our deck list when we look at it in a moment. But the main reason for that is, certainly for Lost Zone Tina, path feels way more impactful because you're shutting down Radiant Greninja from drawing them cards to get out of the Roxanne and to sort of finish you off, whether they need like V-Star or Mirage Gate or whatever else to close out the game. But even against like Arceus decks, I even faced a Arceus Kiram that played Drapion, and me pathing them to stop having Glaciated World to finish off my following VMAX was obviously really integral there as well. So really important to path on the same turn, but it also means that, you know, Lost City stops them recovering a Drapion if it's like a Giratina or whatever. But with the path in play, you're stopping them drawing cards and affecting them that way. And it means that even if they recover the Drapion, then you still need to find a Stadium bounce. And typically they play like one Stadium and maybe one Vacuum. And under that Roxanne with likely quite a large deck size, it's still difficult for them to pull that off. So I actually thought that Lost City was a bit of a bait. Now, I did face a Reggie's in the tournament. It didn't go well, but we'll talk about that in more detail later. But yeah, like I said, landed on Mew probably about a week before the tournament. I was really between Arc, Tina, and Mew. Ended up leaning more towards the Mew as I found so many of the games with Arc Tina was really just not me playing the game well necessarily. It was just me Marty pathing people, and it felt like I had very few decisions to make in the game that actually change anything. Whereas although Genesect is a ton of like digging and whatnot, and there are coin flips involved and stuff, it felt like I was way more in control of my own strategies playing Mew, which made me a little bit happier picking up the deck. And I still really liked its better placement, like I said. And sorry, like you said, I would only really expect Drapion in Tina, and even then I would see it as like a 60% sort of thing. Maybe a handful of Arceus decks pick it up because there was the Flying Pikachu list that did play double Drapion that got second. But I wasn't expecting it in like Lost Box, wasn't expecting it in Gudra, wasn't expecting it in like many Palkia decks at all, because it hadn't made top 8 in the last 2 regionals in America. And we are sort of at the mercy of the American meta, even though it's our first Lost Origin event. Of course, everyone's looking at those results. And seeing things like 4 Reggies and an Arc Gudra is so drastic of a change going into this tournament. I wanted to just outdraw people and just have a safe, consistent deck that I could play a lot of rounds with and have a pretty strong record. But that being said, we did kind of under-respect Reggies by cutting Lost Cities. I guess that can sort of lead us into the list itself. And I think the Stadiums is one of the big talking points here, where we're playing one path that allows us to do the Roxanne path thing for Mirror, for any Drapion, especially in like the Tina matchup and whatnot. That can be huge. Also against Kira and Palkia, again, you can stop lots of things very proactively with this Roxanne path combination, which can be as quick as like turn 2 or 3. You know, as soon as your first VMAX goes down, you turn the game into the late game. It's like straight away, you force that upon the opponent quickly. But then the other options we have is 2 Pokestop and 1 Crystal Cave. The Crystal Cave is a mini tech without actually committing a space to help out Lost Box, because you need to play 4 stadium bounces anyway. So we're playing the vacuum, the cave, and the 2 Pokestops. So that's the critical mass of bounces that we wanted to have, so we don't just lose to random money pathing as very often. But the cave comes in instead of a hyper potion, taking up an extra space to give us some extra healing against Sableye, and also just to negate early cram damage, especially alongside Switch Cart. You can undo 60 of the 110, which is a really big deal, and put you back out of range of a Sableye Sprinkling to finish you off. So that's like a minor tech there. And also the double Pokestop. I just wanted to draw cards and be in the game. And even now, looking back at my tournament, Pokestop did bail me in opening hands like a good amount, even if it just got 1 Quick Ball or 1 Ultra Ball. I remember a time where I got a Cram and a Shoe, and that was enough to get me into the game, fortunately enough. So even though there are risks to Lost City and you can't activate it all the time, I was actually very happy with Pokestop. It really did help me out, and I still really like the stadium split that we landed on. Possibly Cave for Lost City is still that one-of include that I would think, but I would always go back into playing Mew with 2 Pokestops, I think. What was your thoughts on the stadium choices?
Yeah, I was pretty happy with it. The only, like you say, the path was so important that the only kind of awkward thing I found with it was that drawing it early, it meant that you really ended up kind of, unless you were able to weave in a Mani or whatever, you were really limiting yourself on draws. So something that I remember talking to someone else about was trying to adjust it so there was another, like, it's unfortunate there's no great way of being able to like recover stadiums outside of Silene or whatever, because the path, like I say, the path is so important that you really feel like sometimes you can't discard it, which is a shame. The stops were great. I didn't get like masses and masses of value out of them. I don't ever remember sort of being able to stop for a VIP in the early turns or anything, but they were pretty good for just filtering out the deck as like throughout the mid game, grabbing more ball search cards, if nothing else, just to thin out the hand or whatever. It was also quite interesting trying to work out optimal times to Pokestop as well. Like right. I Pokestop pre-Genesect a couple of times, knowing that realistically I was potentially going to see way less cards off of Genesect or whatever, but the odds of hitting more ball search cards or more tablets that I already needed that were insta plays or whatever, or finding Rotom phones to actually make the Genesect like the one Genesect draw I was going to be getting live or whatever. Really interesting. So the Crystal Cave is. I agree though. It was something. I mean, I didn't play a single Lost Box, so I didn't see massive value out of it. I used the Crystal Cave once beneficially. I can't remember why, but a Genesect had some damage on it from somewhere that I was able to heal off over a couple of turns that what would have been, I'm pretty sure, inconsequential anyway. But it was nice. I think I would want to try the Lost City back in again, but again, I didn't really play any Reggies, so I don't know how impactful one Lost City actually is, whether you actually get massive value out of it, or whether just being able to Avery, Palpad Avery, and consistently take KOs each turn is enough in that matchup to see you through. So that's something that I just need to test a bit more. I think it's interesting. The Crystal Cave, I think, is definitely one that people wouldn't have been expecting. Lost Zone Box players, I don't think, would have been expecting. And someone I drove up with, Luke Burke, who ended up getting day 2 with Lost Box, he said a Crystal Cave really would have screwed over a lot of his strategy in that kind of matchup, because he expects the Hyper Pop from DTE,
exactly,
whereas he doesn't expect a Crystal Cave, so he is very happy to go 60-60 on 2 Genesects with a Sableye, knowing that he will slowly build up value over time, and that you can't do when there's a Crystal Cave in the list. So it means, I think there are ways around it. You have to do a weird 90-30 thing. It kind of gets all awkward, but putting people in that situation seems really good, because you can't play around both of those cards at the same time. And if you get to buy a turn against Lost Box, it is huge. It's really, really big. So I was really happy with them, but I didn't play any of the matchups. One where having a Lost City would have been beneficial, or 2 where I got massive benefit out of Crystal Cave. So it's still a bit of a weird point. The amount of stadiums, though, like you say, the critical mass of being able to get out of being pathed. I only played against one path deck, so I didn't need to, but I always felt like I had an out to being able to get out of path. To be honest, if nothing else, getting out of my own path, it meant I could actually be a bit more aggressive with my own path in the mid game if I felt it wasn't a matchup where I was going to have to do a Roxanne path strategy, and I wanted to just slow them down for a turn or so in the mid game and try and build up tempo that way. I didn't ever really worry about having to do that, because I knew I had a lot of outs to being able to immediately bounce path, even holding a couple and like seeing a Marnie or whatever wouldn't have been too worrying because generally, like you say, you maybe play a stop early game, but typically you always have 2 or 3 live outs at any one time in the mid game, which was really, really useful. So yeah, I really liked the stadium split. And yeah, it's crazy how strong pathing in Mew is because it's so like
It's crazy.
it's so yeah in like the in your head it's kind of like so anti-synergistic. You don't want to see Path as a Mew player, but yeah, the raw aggression of the deck and just being able to keep things honest and announce an attack every turn that does a lot of damage and has scalable damage and stuff like this, in combination with a Path, it's like why these Arceus decks play as a Path, right? It's just a really, really good attack, and pairing it with something that's a bit annoying, all of a sudden it like tunes the deck to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like your points on the Crystal Cave. As someone who, before Salt Lake results, was locking in mostly to Lost Box and was playing a ton of Lost Box, I was always conscious of Hyper Potion. So, yeah, like you say, the opponent playing correctly gets punished heavily by the caves, which was why I was so hot on it. I actually faced a Lost Box and a Reggie that we'll talk about in a moment. So I can talk about how it felt to have cave rather than the Lost City. But yeah, the other sort of big call was playing ropes over cross switchers. Now, it does give you a little bit of space to work with. You basically gain a slot because we went up to 3 boss because you still want that very aggressive turn 2 smack. And in many games, you will be trying to just hunt down, use your Echoing Horn and that sort of thing on easy 2 prizes. So I was very happy with the high boss count. Really like that. And we also basically got space to play 2 shoes and 3 phones, which I think in general is usually like 1 more trainer card. It doesn't sound like a huge deal, but it's 1 more draw trainer card, which I was a little bit happy to have. And I also love the inter synergy that these 2 cards have, the shoe and the phone together, and also shoe and Silene. They both have great internal synergy with each other, so I want to play an amount of both of these cards and not just lock into like just 4 phones or like just 3 shoes or whatever. So having that extra 1 card is a little bit helpful compared to cross switchers. And like you were saying, with more supporters in the deck and with stadiums that you don't want to burn necessarily, there is a bit of clog in the list. And I found it really freeing to have ropes in the deck rather than cross switchers, which feel super cloggy at times. And was very happy playing ropes, which obviously have more burn ability, more insta-playability, more instant impact against Arc Gudra, which just won the previous week, which added to the reason to play the card, and also gets around gift energy as well on Reggies when they're attacking with non-Gigas. Obviously, if it's a Gigas, you have to go through it, but even then, you're not really going for hand disruption in the matchup so much. You're going for every disruption in that matchup regardless, so it doesn't really change what we're going for. And actually, when I played against a Reggies, almost always they would have a hand size where the gift energy was getting like 1 card extra, so it didn't make a huge difference anyway, just how the game's panned out. But what was your sort of experience with ropes? I know obviously not playing cross switcher means there are times where we can't Roxanne and Gust at the same time. We are limited into our choice, which is a little bit punishing, and I do think there are some cool plays you can make. Certainly, you played against Tina Drapions quite a lot, which we'll talk about in a moment. And I do think you can make some cool lines if you can go, cross-switching plus Roxanne plus Path all in the same go, comparatively, rather than just pathing, having to go through what they've just hit with and Roxanning at the same time. So they can set up slightly easier checkmates against you if they play it like in the right order. But what was your overall thoughts on rope? I still feel like it's definitely the right choice right now, just on the meta that we expected. I don't think either of us faced Art Goo actually, did we? No, okay, so we didn't see the full benefit, really. But what was your main thoughts on the card? I was very pleased.
I mean, ropes were fantastic. I've always been so the night before I was also considering Fusion Mew, and I in that build I was also playing I think I went up to 3 ropes in that build instead of like 2 ropes and 2 switch. I think I was like 3 and 1 or something, because rope I just think is a fantastic card right now. So yeah, I was super happy with it. I felt like there was again, not that I had masses of testing with the DTE build, but I'd seen from the few hands I'd played, like you say, the cross switches end up getting stuck in the hand, especially if you see them early, which was really annoying. And I think me and you just really wanted to just play the game and be able to maybe not, like you say, you definitely don't have these complete dream turn. You can't have the dream turns anymore. You can't have the big combo turns, like you say, where you're doing all of this stuff and you're able to get out of that checkmate position that you mentioned Tina can put you in. But I don't think that mattered massively, because I think I think against a lot of the situations where you need something like that, ropes were doing something similar anyway. There was a couple of awkward situations where, like roping pushed them into a one prize, which meant I had to then find boss as well. But like you say, because we were playing a higher boss count, it didn't feel like that was a massive issue. It felt like we'd kind of supplemented that anyway, not accidentally, but kind of because we weren't playing cross switches and we wanted to play boss anyway. It all kind of fit together quite well, because then having this extra rope didn't actually affect things too massively, because we were already playing the extra boss for another reason.
Yeah.
So I was a huge fan of the ropes, to be honest. I think that I've always been a big fan of ropes in Mew anyway, but I think it's, like you say, the meta fits for a card like it at the moment. And I was also, again, like you say, really happy to not play cards that you just couldn't play turn one. I only remember 2 or 3 hands this weekend where I genuinely would like do my first Genesect and then not be able to do any more actions, and that would just be because of supporters or more stadiums that I couldn't play or whatever. And that would have happened, I think, even like you say, just because it's only a very minor difference, but having 4 basically unplayable cards in your deck most of the time, because like there'll be situations where you even have double cross switcher, but you don't want to, because like you say, you end up doing the thing where you have to gust up a one prize and still need to find boss anyway, just to thin the hand down to then find the boss you're looking for. So I think the biggest thing was just not having the awkward unplayable hands, I guess, more than anything. I think we're probably, like, the natural power level of the deck probably is a little bit lower than the cross switcher build, but I think we probably got to play more games than the other build would have got to play, and therefore maybe even win those games because we were just end the game at all, rather than being able to get out of weird situations. Like you say, though, again, when we talk about matchups, I'll talk a lot about like the Lost Zone Tina matchup, because it was the matchup I got to play the most, and for sure, cross switches really would have helped in that matchup. But I think I think there's some things that even having cross switches wouldn't have helped with, and even just things I've done differently in the game now that I've played the matchup multiple times and know it a bit more. There's ways I could have put myself in better situations for that matchup that wouldn't have needed cross switches or whatever. So they feel like it's not a win more card, because I don't think it's not that kind of card. It's not like it's just you end up with really awkward hands that sometimes really pay off, but a lot of the time I'm pretty sure just playing the game should be better, because the inherent draw power and aggression and flexibility of this kind of Mew build, I think, should get you through a lot of the situations that cross switcher would also just help in, I guess.
Yeah, and just another tiny thing is that you can ball away bosses way better just because you have that power pad redundancy. But balling or cramming away cross switchers feels horrific. So yeah, overall, I don't think I changed much about the list. I think the cave versus Lost City is literally just meta dependent. But outside of the other counts, I think I'm pretty happy. Like you said, maybe second Marnie would be an only consideration card for extra like cycle. But ultimately, I was very happy. Like going first, I never wanted to Marnie. I only ever wanted to Marnie people when I was going second, really.
Yeah.
And even then, you could debate that like cramming for Avery or other things like that was stronger regardless. So, I don't think it's a huge deal. Otherwise, I'm really happy with the list. And honestly, in 3 weeks' time, I don't think much changes, to be honest, for me in terms of a list.
I think the only thing for me is probably just looking for maybe a fourth switch card, just because there was a couple of situations where I did still like all I was digging for was switch, and especially because you naturally have less energy than the fusion strike build. Because you're only playing 4, it's sometimes harder to find that first one on turn 1, which means you don't have access to using one as a retreat on turn 2. So I think maybe looking for a fourth switch would be the fourth switching card, whether it be another card or probably just I think one card is great. I think I would want to play, if I was playing a fourth switching card, an actual switch probably.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that's the only card that I'm really I have no idea where it slots in yet. But yeah, I was pretty happy with the support account. A lot of the time I was Averying just to see an additional 3 cards, especially if none of the other supporters were particularly impactful. There was a 2-prizer in the active, or there was no 2-prizer on the board, or I was pretty happy with the texture of my hand and didn't want to Marnie it away. So I didn't really get masses of use out of Avery from a disruption point of view. But there were times, especially against some of the Lost Zone decks, or even like a Palkia here and there, where I was able to get rid of an extra Sobble or an extra Comfey or whatever that just was a little bit of an annoyance. It didn't win the game or anything, but it was
Right.
just, it's another it's another piece that they have to get. Whilst also, again, like you say, on that turn two, I very rarely felt like I wanted to do much in some instances, especially in some of these decks where they were playing lots of two prizes like Palkia Kirim or whatever, and you didn't need to boss or anything like that. The Avery was really, really nice just to have some draw power. So yeah, I was pretty happy with the support account. I think Marnie was probably my least used supporter all weekend, to be honest. There wasn't many situations I ended up using it in, but it was really key, like you say, for turns where you have like double DT in hand or whatever, and you just need to again see some raw cards, see some more versatility, and know that you can't just start ultra balling away some of these cards. You've started to clog up some of the really important ones. So yeah. But I think it was probably the supporter I used the least. Maybe Silene, just because there's really weird niche situations where you need Silene and it's amazing, but otherwise you just don't get use out of it. But yeah, I think the support account was pretty good. And yeah, like you said when talking about the boss, the 3 boss was just brilliant because, like you say, there was absolutely no pressure on discarding them early. I never worried about finding them when I needed to. And with Power Pad, yeah, I was very happy getting rid of them, knowing that if I wanted 5 boss in my deck, I could have 5 boss in my deck, which happened multiple times this weekend. I used a couple of boss, discarded a couple of boss, and then Power Padded in another couple of boss just because it was basically the only supporter I used like all game.
Yeah.
It's still even though this is obviously nowhere near as aggressive as the Fusion Strike build, this is still like going first, like we said, it is one of the best aggressive decks going first.
No doubt.
Where you just like basically cut off a portion of your deck and just you become the old Mulists where you're just racing whatever's in front of you. And the deck can still do that really, really well.
Yeah, still absolutely a strong deck. And I am now of the opinion that I think this is stronger than Fusion. I was very skeptical and scared of Drapion, but I'm definitely on board with this. I think it gives you game plans in so many different flexible ways. The spaces that you gain are so good. So should we now go through our days?
Yeah.
Do you want to kick off with yours?
Oh yeah, I can do. So yeah, I had a bit of a weird variety of matchups. Didn't hit any Palkia Intellions, didn't hit any Lost Boxes. First matchup was only hit one Arceus deck as well. First matchup was an Arceus Pikachu Tina. This went kind of how you would expect. This was sort of just chasing down the 2 prizes here and there.
What was their Radiant of choice?
I don't think I ever saw it. I'm pretty sure I never saw it. No.
Both is good for you if they don't play either Holucha or Guardi. They can attack you in different waves with either of them, I guess.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I never saw it. Maybe I did, but I really don't think I did.
I guess the Pikachu takes up space.
Yeah. It was just racing the 2 prizes. I'm pretty sure it was a win-loss win. I'm pretty sure both of us won or lost based on a path to the peak in one of the games, just locking each other out or whatever.
Yeah.
There was one game where I was just able to. Yeah, it was like completely down to the ropes, just being able to bully a lone Arceus on the bench, which was just great. Putting a turn behind. I probably could have been playing a Raihan or something instead as well, but like I didn't see it, so I was able to just keep them off of energy. So yeah, that was just kind of expected, just racing as we mentioned. Pretty much winning. I remember one of the games quite clearly winning based off of Roxanne pathing them out of like the V Star. So they needed the V Star to. I think they had everything. I think they had the full setup and needed the V Star to win. With a Tina and just couldn't find it. So yeah, Roxanne Path like already was just brilliant. Second round was against a Palkia Kirim, which again Path being able to stick Path in play once they'd burnt a couple of training courts was pretty impactful. I don't remember. I think both of these games again. I was able to take a couple of prizes or take a couple of knockouts, knowing that I was going to be going down. I think both games 1 and 2. They were able to get a pretty quick KO on the Mew VMAX fairly early. But yeah, Roxanne just trying to push them out of the game. It's basically the same story throughout the whole day. Roxanne was just brilliant for me. But yeah, that's exactly what you need to do in the matchup. You have to race the early attackers. Because of basically, I think Avery helped me out in the early game, meaning that Palkia without sort of the Inteleon build, they really struggle to KO you with Palkia anyway, so it was completely. I was never too worried about that.
Yeah.
But I remember definitely being able to get rid of like a second Palkia or a second Kyurem or something with an Avery early game,
Nice.
and then Roxanning them. So plus like KO plus Roxanning them, so they were like down to one attacker that they had to basically make it through the rest of the game with. Otherwise, unless they found the rest of what they needed. And realistically, the deck has very, very little draw power. Their best draw power is obviously Greninja, which was Path, and then like Melanie.
Yeah.
Irida finds great pieces, which is great, but if they're if they're using Irida for turn, they're typically finding maybe like a way to bounce the stadium with like a lost a lost vacuum or something, but they're still only drawing a couple of cards. So yeah, it feels like it's a matchup you really can stop their draw power, and if because they have to spend so much energy KOing a Mew VMAX, especially if you're able to deal with the Palkia or whatever, depending on how they've set it up, you can really put them in a situation where they need to have a lot of ways to get a lot of energy onto board to be able to KO the next one. Otherwise, you can just two-shot through them. So, yeah, it's a bit of a blessing in disguise, Mew being a three-prizer in that situation, because they have to spend so much energy, and then you can... It forces them to go into Roxanne Pathway range, which is great. Next up was a Lost Zone Tina. This is a really, really interesting game. I played 3 Lost Zone Tinas throughout the day and went pretty like negative against them. But I think I learned a lot about I learned a lot about the matchup in all three of the games. And I think there's definitely something to. It's definitely a really, really interesting matchup, depending on when they bench Tinas and stuff like this. I didn't see a Thornton really from any of my opponents, so everything that I was playing basically as if they didn't have it, and I was playing basically what was on the table. And yeah, this first one was pretty interesting. The first game he was able to drop double Tina and double Mirage Gate and Mirage Gate to both of them in the same turn, and then KO me with a Drapion. So I just basically couldn't deal with all 3 threats at once. That's exactly kind of what the Tina player needs to do. They just need to basically like pretend they're a 1 prize deck until they have this massive hand. Because we only have 1 Marnie, you have to really time the Marnie well to stop them from doing that. And if they have too many choruses or Confays or whatever, they can just build this massive hand and eventually do something like that, which is, just kind of that checkmate situation that we mentioned earlier on. The second game, I remember just being able to, again, sort of bully the 1 Tina that came out fairly early, wasn't able to put the double Tina down. Pretty sure they had to play a Tina just to have some more basics down in general. They started it or something. It wasn't like from the first matchup where they put double Tina down, they waited and put double Tina down. I knew they were definitely knew what they were doing in the matchup, so I think they had to put the Tina down in that second game for some reason that I was able to just sort of put pressure on, and then them sort of responding with Drapions was never enough, because if you're able to take down a Tina and then you're able to take down a Drapion, typically, like you mentioned, they haven't had time to filter through their deck to the point where they're able to get like a big, they're able to get this big Giratina to Star Requiem you, especially if you're able to like Roxanne them as well. It puts them in a really, really difficult spot where they need to draw like exactly Stadium plus Colrus,
right?
Off of like 2 or 3 cards. So yeah, and then the third game was a bit. It was a bit. Oh, that's right. So yeah, this was something that there was an unfortunate situation in this round where there was a bit of miscommunication between me and my opponent. We both ended up with warnings because there was just a bit of miscommunication. But yeah, essentially there was. I was in this third game. I was completely off the back foot. I remember starting Mew and having to discard a Mew in my first turn just to start drawing some cards. And I remember because my board was like exactly. I think it was a Mew, an Oricorio, and a Genesect, and I was holding an Ultra Ball, and I Genesected, and I was thinking the only cards that can basically lose me this, like I need to use this Ultra Ball to carry on drawing because I'm not going to be able to finish this game. So the only 2 cards I can draw here is like a pair of VMAXs or a pair of Mews. And I drew a pair of Mews, so I had to discard 3 Mews that game to be able to just play the game, basically. And because of that, so because of that, eventually he was able to then KO, or he was able to I had like double Mew down or something. He was able to basically put me to 1 VMAX throughout the game. I had to I had to use Silene to try and get some Mews back, flip double tail, so then I had to dig for the power pad to get Silene back to flip, and I eventually got the power pad got the Silene, flipped some heads, and got some Mews back, but I was just way too far behind them. Drapion just did way too many things in that game. But yeah, that was probably my most awkward game of the day, just because having this really weird situation where I was like, right, I'm out of Mews here. I need to normally a situation like that you've just lost, but with Powpad Silene, there was actually an out, so I was playing towards the out. But yeah, it was there was a bit of miscommunication here and there about like how much damage Drapion did here and there, and it was a bit of an awkward situation. But in the end, I was already too far behind, so I wasn't able to close out that game, which was a shame because it was the first time I'd actually I'd played the matchup a couple of times online, but I'd never played like a full best of 3 against it. So it was actually a really interesting one to play out.
Nice.
Round 4 was Mewtwo v Unique Control, where I just felt I didn't have enough energy. Like naturally, I felt like the deck didn't have enough energy to play anywhere near close to a long game, so you really had to just try and push them out of the game as quickly as possible with well-timed Marnies and stuff, or a well-timed Marnie, I guess. And it just didn't happen. Both of these games, I scooped fairly early. I scooped the second game fairly early just because it was leading into the lunch break, so I was pretty happy. Basically, as soon as they went a little bit ahead, I was like, right, okay, I'm not gonna try and even play for the tie here. I know this is gonna be an uphill battle even trying to get a tie here. So I remember scooping the second game quite early. The first game, I remember just missing. I think I just missed an energy for a turn or two, which is basically the death of the deck. You need to be able to keep up with an attack a turn, and realistically, unless you're able to get to Mew VMAXs out, you need to be able to spend your tablets turn after turn just to KO Snorlaxes as well. So I think it's not the easiest matchup. I definitely think it's winnable. 100%. But I think you need to draw fairly well, and I wasn't able to, so that was unfortunate. But it wasn't something that I was necessarily expecting, but it also wasn't something that I was that upset about losing to, because I knew, a deck playing full special energy against a control deck is always going to have a very uphill battle.
Yeah. You don't have the damage to reliably leap the game away, because they'll get to Mewtwo and pressurize you, right?
Basically the only thing I remember in the first game, as soon as I kind of realized I was losing the first game, I quite quickly realized the only way I'm actually going to be able to win this game is if I can Silene my tablets back and basically hold like a 4 tablet turn to just kill the Mewtwo v Union. But he got rid of all my energy before I could even.
Were they playing just hammers, or were they playing Yveltal? What was the?
So I never saw Yveltal. The funniest part of the matchup was actually a Misfortune Sisters which hit 5 items, which was really annoying because it was like 2 tablets or something.
So it was like Flannery hammers, was it?
But
just the stuff.
So essentially, both of the games were pretty much sealed up. Once I didn't see, obviously they weren't. I didn't see a lot of stuff, but I didn't see any Sydneys. I didn't see any Sydneys or anything, but I was pretty quickly out of energy. Like you say, you don't have as much aggression as the Fusion Strike build. You have to actually spend resources to take KOs, whereas in the Fusion Strike build you can just be a Meloetta and deal 140, and then be a Mew and deal 140, and it's completely fine. Well, it's not completely fine, but it's way more fine than just actually having to even just finding like the second VMAX to switch between them. It's more cards that you actually have to play down as well. And also the Pokestops were something that naturally were helpful in trying to get to a board state where I was able to chain attack, but also were really helpful for my opponent as well. So I remember basically playing one Pokestop all game because I knew the first one was so useful for them at some point. I was like, I can't really, unless I know I'm going to get massive value out of this, I really can't play this because it's just going to be helping them realistically. Thin down to that perfect Mewtwo point. So yeah, it was an awkward one, but I was pretty. I feel like me scooping it kind of early was something that maybe if I'd played, I could have squeaked out a tie-in. Right. But this is something that I think isn't necessarily done a lot of the time, and it's important to just more than anything for my good headspace for the rest of the tournament. I was like, right, I don't want to play the rest of this game. I want to go and get some food. I want to go and have a bit of a break, especially because I was running on very little sleep at this point. I was like, I'm not gonna try and eke out a tie from this. I'm gonna put myself in hopefully a better position for the next 5 rounds by actually going and grabbing some food and grabbing some water and feeling a bit better and so I could have squeaked out a tie, but I was pretty happy to just say I lost to control. I was playing for special energy. No, it is what it is. Round 5 was like a Glaceon Inteleon box deck, which was pretty interesting.
This is Glaceon VMAX, right?
Yeah, it was both. So the ropes were really useful in that one because the Glaceon's V-Star power gives it complete immunity. So the ropes were pretty good there. Not that the ropes were doing good. Not that they went VMAX instead of V-Star a lot of the time. I think not realizing. I think they've got a new player because they didn't realize how Max Miracle interacted with the Glaceon's ability. So I had to basically explain to them that even though the Glaceon said no, my my Mew VMAX said no to saying no. So that was I had to basically explain that to them, which I think disheartened them quite a bit because I was like, I could see that was kind of what he built his whole strategy around. So that was a shame. But yeah, that was the only Inteleon deck I played all day, to be honest.
Wow.
There wasn't. I felt like there was a lot of Palkia around, a lot of Palkia and Inteleon around me, but I didn't see any of it at all, which was interesting. Round 6 was Fusion Mew. I was able to win this one. I think looking back on it, I not even looking back on it. I definitely got lucky in these games for sure. I was definitely. I think realistically, this is probably slightly unfair for us because unless you can get a 1 prizer into the active, they have access to take the first 2 prizes, which kind of negates if you go first.
Do you think Path Rocks does not give you enough to? I feel favoured. I think against Fusion.
I think it's tough because I don't know how many. So this is a friend of mine. This was Jay.
Yeah.
I don't know how many outs they were playing to Path. So I don't know how many. I remember. I don't think I won the game off of Path going in the first game. I'm pretty sure I went first in the first game. And I think I either gave him a 1 prize or he didn't take a KO. I can't remember, but either way, it was just a fairly standard old school Mew mirror where you're just chasing 2 prizes.
Yeah. And presumably they don't have space for the same disruption, right? They don't play rocks.
Yeah. He did play Marnie, but there was no Roxanne Path or anything.
Right.
Game 2, I definitely felt I got pretty lucky. My Roxanne, so it was weird because Roxanne probably does give you enough, but I don't think I Roxanne in either game, or maybe I did game 1, but I don't remember got Roxanning in game 1, and I definitely didn't game 2 because it was prized.
Right.
And I remember having to basically because he went first, and going second we can do nothing, so he was very easily able to take the first 2 prizes on a Genesect and then the second 2 prizes on a Genesect, and really not only put me without a draw.
Yeah.
Or put me with a smaller draw engine, but also just be ahead in tempo by far. So I couldn't Rox him, and I remember having to basically Marnie, quad damage mod his active, hope that he didn't have a second Mew VMAX out. He played all 4 Fusion Energy, so it was just he basically lost to Boss DTE VMAX, which was quite a lot. From a Marnie Path, but I knew I hadn't seen a stadium all game, and I was pretty sure he played Lost Sweeper Lost Vacuum, because I'd spoken to sort of him and his team the night before about their list, so I was pretty sure they played it. So I was like, the best I can do here. I've won a game going first. I've lost a game going second. The best I can do, or I'm going to lose this game probably. The best I can do is Marnie Path and hope. And it turned out. So because I couldn't Rox, he was holding double stadium, but it turned out because I was able to Marnie rather than Rox, he actually had way less outs than if I'd Roxed because he had to put double stadium onto the bottom, and because he was bossing every turn, quite frequently, I wasn't having to spend tablets or whatever. He wasn't drawing masses and masses of cards, so he was still a 25 card deck or something, with knowing that at least 2 stadiums were in the bottom 5 or 6 or 7, however many. So it turned out there just really wasn't a lot of outs for him to draw. So I don't know whether Rock's Path would have done the same thing, but yeah, Path did great things in that game. I felt unfavored. Basically, the biggest reason I felt unfavored was just because I think he could have very easily set up a checkmate board there if he hadn't spent any tablets or anything.
Right.
If he'd found a VMAX or found an energy or something, he very easily could have been in a much better position.
Needing
but just
fewer
didn't see any of
cards.
those things.
Yeah.
Didn't see any of those things pre me pathing him, meant that he then didn't have as strong of a board after the path.
Right.
Whereas if he did have a strong board, like he could have very easily just drawn a boss. In fact, I even think he drew a boss off of the Marnie or whatever, but just couldn't like get the KO. Just had to like boss stall a Genesect or something. So I think I definitely could have very easily lost that even through pathing. Obviously, Roxanne compared to Marnie could have put him down to a smaller hand size or whatever. But it's a tough one. It seems like actually a really quite a volatile matchup based on how much both players can burn through their deck, I guess.
Sure.
And how you set yourself up for the late game, I guess. How impactful that Marnie, Rock's path can be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I personally felt I got pretty lucky there, because I think the more I thought about it, the more I was like, oh, maybe this is slightly unfavored.
I definitely think that like a sparkle attach rope is less reliable than you getting Rock's path when you need it, because it's like so much earlier in the game for them to have everything that they have to have drawn way better than we have to have like slowly accumulate those things at the right time. So I think it's
I don't disagree with that.
I still think it's favoured for DT, honestly.
Yeah, it was to be honest, it was really interesting though. It was actually I enjoyed playing the Lost Zone Tinas, and I actually really enjoyed playing this game against Jake. It was quite interesting because I remember quite enjoying how old Mew mirrors sort of went sometimes.
Right.
So yeah, it was a really interesting game, and it was obviously like super laid back because it was with a friend.
Yeah.
It was someone we realized we hadn't played in like 6 years or something crazy.
That's mad.
Which is mad considering we see each other all the time. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Right, on to the next.
So yeah, then a couple more Lost Zone Tinas, some really interesting games again against Lost Zone Tina. Two fans of the channel actually as well, who said hi and were really, really friendly. So yeah, that was it was great to have chats with them about how they were finding playing and stuff like that. The first one, I remember basically screwing myself over in like I remember having access to a KO and attaching to the wrong Pokemon or something, and it meant that I was then digging for one of our switch outs, which obviously we play a smaller amount of, and rope. Essentially we played one of, because I didn't want to rope because there was a 2-prizer in the active. So I remember definitely screwing myself over for one of the games there. One of the games I was able to... My opponent did this sort of checkmate play where they get the Drapion and the Giratina out, but then instead of attacking with the Drapion, attacked with the Giratina. So I was able to take out the Giratina and lock a path in play, and basically if they had Stadium Bounce, they had Stadium Bounce, and I lost, but I knew that was like that was the best thing I could do. So yeah, that's the kind of weird checkmate position that they can put you in. They should always attack with the Drapion first.
Right,
yeah, because there's realistically nothing you can do in our build.
Yeah, that's what it forces
without cross switches. Yeah. There's nothing we can do to kill the Giratina and Roxanne path you. Which is where the only thing cross switches may be more useful.
You have to do a really roundabout play, which is like leave the Tina, not knock it out, gust something else up, Oricorio finish off Tina. Finish off Drapion, set up Tina for the rest, then bring the Tina back in. It's like a super annoying way to deal with it.
Yeah, I must admit, there was a couple of times this weekend where I did glistening droplets onto Giratinas, either setting them up or taking KOs on them. Yeah. Because I knew that like if that ever got into the active, it was taking 3 prizes, and if that wasn't a Drapion was, so yeah, it had to stall behind something. It's a really fine balance. But yeah, it was a great game though, and it was really good to see him like as soon as I knocked out the Giratina, he was like, oh, I've realized what I should have done here. I should have attacked like now. And we were like sort of talking about the interaction. So yeah, that was probably my favorite series of the day, to be honest. That ended up in a tie, but yeah, that was a really good back and forth, to be honest. A really interesting one. It's a shame it was a tie, because I think realistically it could have gone either way with one extra turn, to be honest. So it was a shame that it ended up being a tie. But I'm pretty sure this was the player that ended up making it to day 2 and ended up in top 16. So I was really glad that he was able to make it all the way into day 2, which was cool. There was another Lost Zone Tina, which this one was just I just wasn't able to deal with the the constant onslaught of Drapions and
I think going
guarantees
second,
that
if
they'll
you
provide,
lose that coin flip, I think it is really rough, to be fair.
It is. It's really really difficult, especially if they have like a fairly productive couple of turns with conveys and stuff, because then they can filter out so many like dead cards and stuff that even roxing them doesn't have the biggest of impacts, just because they've got rid of a load of the stuff
They can play
need.
gates and stuff. You're already like
Yeah,
way
exactly.
behind.
They can gonna say they can thin out the deck really well. So yeah, that was a double loss, and that was when I was I think I was out at that. Yeah, I was out at that point. But again, it was another
That was
pretty
round
good
eight,
series, to
right?
be honest. Yeah, that was round 8. Another pretty good series. None of the Tinas I played against, I felt super bad about losing, because I felt like I was learning a lot about the matchup anyway. And I think they were, like I say, it's a really interesting matchup when one or the other isn't bricking. When actually both players get to play the game, it's a pretty interesting matchup. I think I prefer to be my side just from experience with Mew, but I bet it's pretty interesting being on the Tina side, especially like timing, benching Drapions and stuff and things like that. So yeah, that's a pretty interesting one. And then the final round was against like a Flaffy box, which was really interesting, to be honest. There was some attackers in there that I had not seen in a long time. Unfortunately, he definitely, I think he started Crobat in game 1 and prized Crobat game 2 or something. So just had basically no draw power in the early game.
Oof.
And then he started a 2-prizer in the first game. Only played two prizers, but started a 2-prizer in the first game and had to put a Crobat down to draw. And then game 2 prized the Crobat, started the 2-prizer again and prized the Crobat. So my opponent got pretty unlucky there.
So what we're talking for?
But yeah.
What's in their
So it was-
fluffy box?
So essentially, what they were doing was they were Zekrom paralyzing things to force switch outs out of people,
Right.
and then they were basically Zekrom paralyzing people for a turn, and then attacking with Snorlax to finish off VMAXs and V stars and stuff.
Okay, so it's
so
a
it was all-
two-shot with sometimes a free turn is the idea.
Yeah, and then they had Raichu to be able to, so they would basically do that for the first couple of prizes, and then they had Raichu V to be able to just get a like Flaffy and stuff to it a couple of times, and then just blow something up
Cool.
in the late game. But yeah, unfortunately, both games they started the Raichu, so it was just against something like a Mew, it was just really really easy for me to like bully the 2 prizes essentially, which was a shame because it meant that I never really got to see the deck work. The paralysis on the not especially for Alice because we still had 3 switch outs, but the paralysis actually was pretty annoying. To be honest, I definitely lost a turn or 2 here and there. The damage wasn't like massively impactful. It does 130. He was playing Zapdoses and stuff, so was able to scale it.
Okay.
Yeah, the Zekrom actually one-shots a Palkia, which is really interesting with a Zapdos on the board. So I think he was basically trying to like target a couple of specific decks. And I don't think Mew. I can see how he would have been able to win games against Mew, to be honest, because especially people disrespecting switch outs and stuff early. I could very easily see them getting paralyzed for a turn and then blown up by a Snorlax, and them just presenting a complete like 1-prize board where you're just not able to catch back up at that point, even being able to take a couple of prizes here and there. But yeah, unfortunately, it just wasn't able to tick for that game, which was a shame because he said he hadn't had issues with the deck pretty much all day. It was just losing to auto losses or whatever. But the consistency had been there all day, so it was winning him for points, which was a shame that he wasn't able to close it out. But yeah, a really really friendly opponent. All of my opponents this weekend were great, really friendly. And yeah, so yeah, that was way longer than I expected it to be. But yeah, I had a load of fun with the deck, to be honest. It's really interesting playing. It's a massively defensive build, but a more defensive build than the Fusion Strike build. Having more just the supporter options in the deck is really really interesting. It's something that I think Mew very quickly got tunneled into being the most aggressive deck in the format and doing nothing else. And it's probably only just sort of been able to have this kind of DTE build. This probably wasn't even an option earlier on than it was actually discovered. But Mew is so flexible, and the draw engine of Genesect is so good. Theoretically, you should be able to basically play anything in this deck,
Right.
and you should be able to put it off pretty consistently because you're drawing so many cards. So yeah, a really, really interesting one, and some great puzzles with the deck and trying to work out how you fit in all these different supporters on turns and stuff like that. I really, really enjoyed it.
And obviously Mew won the event, so it wasn't the worst call in the world for the tournament as well. Like in hindsight,
Yeah, that's true.
The Tinas that did make it to top 8 happened to not play Drapions, so there's the good side of RNG there. But honestly,
They're all going to play Drapions now.
yeah,
though.
that's the problem. I think it's a harder play going into Warsaw now that Mew has been thrown back on the map and.
The target is back on its back.
It's back targeted again. But yeah, it was not too dissimilar from our list. Obviously, they were playing cross switches. But they basically played like the standard Mew 60 that we saw previously with cross switches and Lost City. That was just about it. The stuff that we've been seeing online, to be honest. They may have played double cart, I can't remember. But yeah, for my tournament, I started off in a Mew mirror match where Roxanne Path lied 3 times. So I lost the coin flip. And got into Roxanne Path range. They literally had to have Stadium because, like you said, they weren't set up. They needed to get VMAX, Energy, 1 mod, and Gust to beat me because it was like an Oricorio board. So they had to deal with the Genesect with a mod, and they just got Roxanne into Stadium, and there's the game. When I was Roxanne, I was in the perfect position where I only needed a boss to win because I had a belted VMAX both active with all the energies and stuff. So I just hit boss. I didn't need to hit Stadium, so it felt like a less lucky survival of Roxanne, I want to say. And then the third game, I Roxanne, but after all my digging, I can't hit Path anyway, so it's like a very futile Roxanne where I'm passing with an Oricorio active and really hoping, crossing my fingers, but it's like a big miss of Path there. So it was very yikes. That was going into the last turns of time as well. I remember thinking that I could like play a ton more actions on one of the turns to try and just like we could just tie here. We could just take the tie. But I was like, I feel like I'm in a good enough position to win the game if I Rox Path hit. So I literally just take a turn not digging through my deck to just smack. So I had enough attacks in the game to win. You know what I mean? So I literally just took a turn to draw boss attack.
Yeah.
And had I had enough time to cycle through my deck more, I was much more likely to hit the Path Roxanne, or I could have just made a different board state as well. So it was kind of down to time that I missed the Roxanne Path combination. I had to like play my hand down as low as possible, kind of cloggy hand, so I had to play the Roxanne proactively, and then had like 2 more Genesects to see the rest, and didn't quite get there. So that was a bit of a shame, losing the Mew Mirror. I mean, I lost the coin flip, and Roxanne just didn't do the stuff. So that was a real bad feel, but it is a volatile matchup. They played 4 Stadium bouncers just like us. They played a Vacuum. They actually played Winden Stadium as their like anti-lost box card / Tina card where you can evolve up and heal a Mew, which is kind of funny. I think it's probably worse than Cave, but yeah, they played the 4 Stadium stuff as well. So that was loss, win, loss into Mew Mirror. Round 2, I beat an Arc Kiram with Drapion. So actually kind of scary because they can represent KO with Drapion and KO with Kiram VMAX, similar to how Tina can do so. Luckily won the coin flip, so game 1 goes pretty smoothly where I can just deal with early Kiram, where they actually got the turn 1 attack off with a Kiram attaching to 2 different Kirams. So they were loading up their stuff, but I got the most heavily energied up Kiram, dealt with that. They respond with Drapion, I respond with Path KO. It's an easy way to win. Lose the second game, because I don't even get going really anyway. And then I wanted to give myself as much time as possible. I gave myself like half an hour to win the final game, which is pretty routine. So that was really cool. In round 3, I face a Palk Intel. This wasn't even a series. It was Hebrick, I win. He literally flipped over mana feed, chose not to reveal any other information about his deck, and just skipped immediately. Like, chose not even to play a bucket or anything, or an energy card. I think he said he could have seen like 1 or 2 cards. I can't remember how, by making an action, but said the hand was so bad that it wasn't worth revealing information. Like, it may have just been getting a basic down, but decided to like not give me that info, which I guess is fair enough, because I literally said when I saw Mana Fee, I was like, this could be anything. And then I have a Mew brick, and then they have a Palk brick again. So it was literally like a 10-minute series of us shuffling between games as we could scoop into each other, which is just so dumb. Round 4 was Reggie's. Now, we're under-teched for Reggie's, but the game plan is still very much, we have Avery, we have Pad, we have Silene if need be. Silene can be getting back Avery, or it can be getting back Horn as well, because you can Avery, Horn, and annoy them, and force a lot out of them. Unfortunately, they get to go first, so they have a turn setting up the Reggie board, then I have a turn to not respond on them, and then on turn 2, they were able to get the Aleki hit on me, and they were able to put damage onto my Mews, which is a real problem, because it sets up no belts required for the rest of the game on their stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's a real problem. I also, the way I drew my cards, I had to evolve into VMAXs before I got Switch Cart as well, so I couldn't deny that play, which is a minor thing, but a little bit annoying. It came pretty close. I was doing the Avery stuff, actually on my second Avery, so I'd done the Avery, they do the rebuild, they get one VMAX knockout, then it's that second pal-padded Avery where I'm digging really hard into the deck as well. Fortunately enough, they are playing paths, and fortunately enough, I've had bounces like throughout, so I've been able to cycle through the deck very nicely, but my bottom card in deck literally is Echoing Horn, and I'd already played my pal-pad, so I couldn't draw that final card, because I just deck out and wasn't able to leap that turn. So I couldn't Avery and Echoing Horn, which I think could have been like lights out for him, because he was quite a few nets deep. And he would have had to spend a net to move something else out of the active position, because I was obviously knocking out a Gigas as well that turn. So really annoying that my bottom card literally was Horn in game 1, because I feel like I was really close to eking it. It was actually a really close series, despite them having like that pretty good start, because fortunately I was always finding Stadium and getting drawing and doing my annoying stuff. So I like online, I'd obviously been playing this deck, and obviously Gigas is slightly weaker online because they don't have gift energies, but it was coming out okay. It was coming out pretty much 50-50 in the matchups that I was facing them without Lost Cities. I think on reflection, a Lost City just gives you a lot more confidence in the matchup, because then you have a couple lines that you can attack them with.
Yeah, I guess a combination of Lost Citying one of the ones, and then a Horn or an Avery. Yeah. Just, like you said, there's just a lot of things that
it's just extra headache for them to play around, basically.
Trying to get around all 3 things.
It's annoying because you want to play 2 really, because silening back a Lost City doesn't feel great when it could be a Horn anyway, and you can do like other stuff with it. So it's not like that big unless you play the 2. That we didn't want to commit to, really. And then the second game, I literally just get stuck with a path and can't do anything and lose like immediately, so it wasn't even close. And then, there's no debate around whether it should be a Lost City or anything else, because any Stadium saves me. But so a really like tactical long game against Reggie's, where they had the decent start and got to go first, so had that extra time of breathing room against me to get that set up. And even then I couldn't get the maximum disruption on them, which was a bit of a shame. Round 5, it's against Kieran Palkia with Bibarrel, and that makes it a lot harder. Going back to your round 2 when you said Roxanne Path wins you the game. Oh dear, that doesn't work for me. And again, I lose the coin flip, so we go, I lose the game he starts, I win the game I start, and then it comes actually down to time, so I go for a stalling play with Boss on Bibarrel, and just retreat, trying to force Gust out of them. Actually, no, it wasn't even trying to force Gust out of them. It was just they had just thrown all the energies off board, and they'd already used Palkia, and they didn't actually have space for Guru either, because they had Bibarrel on board, Fish, and other stuff. They didn't have space to guarantee Glaciated World attach onto their Palkia V-Star to finish off a 2-prizer. So I was just passing with a 2-prizer active, because it was in turns of time. Or their last turn of time, and they had to thin their hand down to get 1 draw from Bibarrel, and it had to be Melanie, and it was, and they had like a 15-card deck and 2 Melanies, and they were genuinely like so shocked that they hit it as well, but it is what it is. It probably should have been a tie on balance of things, but without us having to disrupt
having that option to disrupt with Roxanne Path, I think I'm super unfavored in that matchup. I think anyway, like losing the coin flip and not having disruption means you should lose that game most of the time, as long as they have the perfect setup. And I think in both the games they got to go first, they double VIP past me as well. So it's just like they have the good RNG and the list that beats me. So it probably should be an L overall.
Not much you can do.
Yeah, round 6 was against Lost Box with Drapion. And this is like a Tord Lost Box with Radiant Zard as their sort of late game, and they play Paths and the triple vacuum and stuff. Game 1 is actually a really long series that I'm able to grind out. I think you should be very unfavored into this deck because the Drapion 1 knockout allows them to like then on get one easy KO like just slowly with a Charizard, either just by doing like a rope thing once the Drapion's dealt with and dealing with like a Genesect, or just like cram plus Sableye through a Genesect as well. Basically, you just get through one VMAX, and obviously our list doesn't have Lost City, but even if Mew does play Lost City, you try and only Drapion once anyway.
Yeah.
Or that would be your game plan, and then you find prizes elsewhere. In this case, obviously, we don't play Lost City, so they have the option to Clara it back, so we have to be locking in that Roxanne Path, which I'm able to do. And they went a little bit too far vacuuming, so they were locking themselves out of Charizard late game anyway. So we were pretty good there. Obviously, my path coming into effect as well, so they'd had enough vacuums to play around their own paths, but then my one comes down, and they don't have that final replacement to be able to either Clara back a Drapion to be useful, or to use their Zard to deal with my stuff. So overall pretty good. The Roxanne Path ultimately worked after I dealt with their Drapion, and then I was able to actually bring it back for more prizes for me to bring the game a turn earlier for the dub as well. So I really it was honestly like a 30-minute win, and it was like a very tricky one as well from where I was standing. But the cave came in handy and the switch cart came in handy because, of course, they're roping you a lot. So you can choose the time to put your Genesect active for the free hits, basically, which is really good for you. And unfortunately, it's a literal Mew brick, and it wasn't even because they pathed me. I literally just had tablets, bosses, and belts in hand, just a Mew start. So it's just very sad. All my hard work into a hard matchup, getting a big dub, knowing that the deck is so slow. Even with a Drapion, I don't think they can beat me in 20 minutes, probably, just the amount of actions that we both have. But they just donk a Mew. And then it comes to game 3. I'm actually feeling in a good position, but I was so involved in the game that I didn't have full awareness of time. I literally didn't give myself enough attacks to win in the amount of time left. So I had to end up just leaping my VMAXs away to just secure a tie, basically, so they didn't have enough prizes to take. Which is a shame, because I worked very hard to win the first game. Game 2 literally just wasn't a game. And game 3, I was in a commanding position but needed more time to win the game, unfortunately. Yeah. So we're way out of contention now. I was already out of contention with the Kieran Pauk loss. But we need to win 3 on the bounce to scrape back some points. I'm able to beat a Palkia Kyurem without the barrel, and like you said, we have the disruption. It's pretty much in our favour. That's just a win-win, actually, because I think they had a pretty suboptimal setup the game they got to go first, which is cool. And then I come up against 2 Tinas without Drapion in rounds 8 and 9, and they were both similar stories, honestly. It doesn't feel close when they don't have Drapion. I'm constantly preparing my hand around the Drapion to come out, then you don't see it game 1, and you're still trying to play around it game 2 both times, just in case it's prized and stuff. So you're in your own head a lot, but ultimately they can't do a huge amount to you. Even if they're trying to remain one prize for a while. Like, if you're not playing Drapion, you have to remain one prize for a while, just fill up your zone and try and get a hit in that sticks on a VMAX somehow. And then try and come in with a 280 into the knockout with the V star power. But it's so tough for them. And when we have hand disruption from Marnie, Echoing Horn boss plays available to them, when some of them are playing 1 Rod, 1 Recycler split, it's hard for them to deny that. And they're not going to touch your hand most of the time unless it's Roxanne, and again, you're prepared for it and you don't care because they don't play Path. So Tina definitely should be playing Drapion if they want any chance to beat Mew. I'm pretty certain of that. I said that before the event, and I still think it's true. I still think it's close, honestly, when they do play Drapion, but without it, it's a pretty free ride for Mew. But yeah, that's the rundown for both of our tournaments.
Yeah.
like we say, it won the tournament, which makes it probably a harder play for Warsaw because in those like
No.
I think those 50% of Tina's now become like a 70% of Tina's probably play it, maybe more.
Yeah.
Any Tina player who played the event and lost to Mew probably now puts a Drapion in if they continue to play the deck, and I think more people will move on to Tina just as the tournament goes because again, the top eight necessarily was like it was quite good for Lost Zone Tina. I think it was not scary stuff like Reggie is doing super well. It's things like Blissey getting second, which you want to face, and Mew that you can tech for with a Drapion, and then you want to face it. So I think Tina could be popular for Warsaw, certainly. And I also think there could be some Lost Boxes adding it, and there can be some Palkias adding it as well. Like Palk Intel can reasonably play the card. So I think it's a worse spot for Mew. I probably won't come back to the deck, even though I think it's still pretty okay. With this 3-week stint, I want to put time into other stuff. I'm less scared to play Lost Box now because we've seen that Europe, there's a handful of people playing Blissey. One spiked the tournament. They even said in their interview before top 8 that they just want to dodge Tina. And I think it's such a brave thing to do that. I don't think many people will have the same mentality. And I think there will be less Reggies because it overall didn't do too well. There was a person who was top seed after day 1, but they failed to win a game in day 2. So probably bad variance in there, no doubt. But the Tina hype, the Reggie hype died down quite quickly, I think, after this weekend, kind of petered out. There might be still a few dedicated players wanting to play the deck, certainly. But I would still think it's probably like sub 10% of the meta despite having that big tournament run just last week. So in terms of metagaming, I'm going to put a ton of time into Lost Box, I think. Again, it's what I was doing before Salt Lake. Wanted to play, was scared off by Salt Lake results. Now I see this top 8 and I think Lost Box is probably where my head's at. Where are you thinking for testing right now? We've got a long time until the tournament, so...
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think I need to do any more testing with Mew. I think it's a very easy fallback play for both of us at this point if we do decide to just play safe, quote-unquote,
right.
in terms of... so I think, honestly, probably Giratina. I think, again, this is less from a metagame perspective and more just, to be honest, from playing against the deck this weekend. I've played a bit of Giratina and I've really enjoyed it. Playing against the deck, I felt like every game that I was playing against it, my opponents were having tough decisions, but it was a very rewarding deck seemingly for my opponents to play, and that's the kind of thing I want to look into. So to be honest, I probably will be testing a bit of Tina myself, especially if naturally it looks like it's... I mean, I'm just looking at the top 8 now, and like you say, there's nothing... It only got all the way to top 4, but realistically, there's nothing that screams to me in that top 8 that look particularly scary. Obviously, mirrors are a bit shaky here and there, but I'm never the biggest fan of playing a deck where you're like playing the most popular deck in the room just because mirrors can be very coin flippy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I enjoy Tina. I think every single one of my opponents playing Tina this weekend against me seemed to enjoy it and seemed to be like it seemed like a very rewarding deck to play. So yeah, that will probably be where I put some time in over the next couple of weeks, I think.
Respectable. And again, playing a Tina or playing a Mew basically just takes the metagaming out of it, and you're saying that you're just playing one of the best decks, and if you just pilot it well, that's just what you're banking on, that you have the power level at your side.
I loved about playing you this weekend. Like I say, I was dodging a card rather than a matchup, and that felt really good. Because yes, everyone could play the card, and you just have to chalk that up and be like, oh, everyone played the card. But outside of like, I guess exactly control, where I was like, I really haven't thought about this, and I really don't want to. I don't want to think about this, so I want to avoid that matchup. Everything else, I was pretty much like, okay, this is still a Mew deck. This is still like this feels like familiar territory. This doesn't feel massively scary. There's nothing. There's no matchups where you turn over. You're like, oh well, I might as well just pack it now. I got to play pretty much. I think there was a couple of games I bricked or whatever, but I got to play at least 1 or 2 games in every single series this weekend. Like not only because of the consistent list, but also because the deck can play the game against pretty much every deck in the format. So. That's something that's really appealing and something that I think I personally don't do enough, and it's really nice to not have to worry about dodging and weaving matchups specifically and stuff. Especially, again, like I say, where I feel like Drapion in Tina is actually fairly easy to navigate. It's just going to be things like Lost Box and Palkia that it just buys too much time for them
Yeah.
to realistically actually make Mew worth playing still.
Yeah. I mean, this is coming from someone who's just played Mew. I still think it only makes sense to add Tina into Drapion into Tina.
Yeah.
But I can see other people doing it because Mew's just won and they don't want to lose to Mew. Like, I can see
Yeah,
it being
it's
a 30% card
100%.
in more lists than it was going into this weekend. I feel like this deck was almost what I thought about it before the tournament was it's similar to 2019 Worlds Blacephalon when no one actually played Finny because Blounds was like the 5th best deck. He was respected, but not enough to actually tech for it because it's not enough in the room. Mew actually turned out being more popular than I expected. Day one field. We actually haven't seen those stats yet, but it was popular, I think. Yeah.
I remember walking around and I wasn't the only person that said this. There was a lot of Mew in the room.
Mew looked, I don't know if it was quite. It definitely felt over 10%. I haven't actually seen the data. I don't know if that's been released yet, but it felt easily over 10%, like pushing maybe 12-15%.
Yeah.
Popular deck.
So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I'm pretty happy, like very much parking Mew anyway and just picking it up the night before if we need.
I'd actually never played Mew in a tournament, so I finally got some value out of those cards.
Yeah, wonderful. I all I've been able to do is make points with Mew. The only deck I'm being able to make points.
You still got me points, so I can't be too mad at it either.
Yeah, but yeah, I think Tina is still. I think there's still, to be honest, like you say, I think there's still a lot to be explored with Lost Box, and there's a couple of interesting things that I saw in some Lost Box this weekend that I do want to try out. To be honest, I know you're a big fan of.
Oh, Jack, I had a fever dream car drive home yesterday with the mad scientist himself, so I've got some ideas to throw around for the next 3 weeks, that's for sure.
I haven't. I know you're a big fan of the gates and stuff, but I actually haven't played enough of like old school Sablezard Tord build.
Yeah.
So I want to test a bit more of that as well. Just trying to keep things a bit more simple and just playing the good cards and trying to just out resource people in terms of having great one prizes. So it'll definitely be Lost Zone stuff. The only deck that I had a real inkling of playing the night before was Palk Intel, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna try and steer. Like I've told basically everyone to not let me play the deck just because I think I take the wins way too seriously and forget about all the bricks that deck sometimes has. So I think that's the one deck that I need to stop myself from playing, even though I still really think Palkia and Kyurem, to be honest. I was super close to playing Kyurem the night before.
Yeah.
That was basically the deck I was going to play, but had in the car drive had some games with Kyurem, and it just felt, all of the turn ones felt so shaky. Compared to even compared to Palk Intel, at least like getting a Sobble down means you have Drizzle to carry on, whereas you're basically limited to drawing 2 cards per turn with that deck. You have Melanies, you have Eridas, blah blah blah, but like you are very much at the mercy of the cards you see immediately, and that was something that I just wasn't in the end keen on, which was a shame because I was very close to playing the same list as Benji, who ended up getting top 16. So he had more bravery than I did.
Oh,
but
he didn't play phones. Still tilts me that he didn't play phones. I feel like that card is so strong in the deck. But anyway, that's a deep dive into Mew today. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and for those who stuck around, thanks so much. I think we're probably going to be easing into the Silver Tempest content now. We obviously do have Warsaw, and I probably will be doing still some online tournament result discussions and stuff like that. So my mind is still very much focused on the now, but we are going to be spinning off into Silver Tempest stuff coming soon, including some tabletop gameplay as well coming soon. So yeah, lots to look forward to. And for the Europeans out there, and even some people trying to get in on the stipend grind. I know there's some people flying all the way from the US to Warsaw as well. There's going to be some stuff for you as well. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in another one soon. Cheers.